Aunt Nell.
Before we start, I just want to let you know that this episode talks about suicide. There are also sexual references.
Homosexual, homosexual, lesbian, lesbian. We are homosexual, we are homosexual, we're all gay, we're all gay, we're all gay, we're all gay.
You're listening to Sing It Pink, the story of the Pink Singers, London and Europe's oldest LGBTQ+ choir. I'm Cassian, and I'm a 1001, and for this, our first episode, I'll be your guide, or should I say, your conductor. It's 1983, London, and a 34-year-old up-and-coming stage star called Mark Bunyan is having lunch with a friend. Together, they're talking about a new project, a choir, a lesbian and gay choir, the first of its kind in Europe. Mark had always loved performing. As a child, he'd been obsessed with pantomime and studied at the Royal College of Music. Now, in his adulthood, he was becoming a name in the world of cabaret. But it hadn't been a smooth road.
I mean, I just looked at Steve Reeves' body and I just, I didn't want to have his body, but I wanted to have a go with his body.
At a young age, Mark had realised that he was gay. He'd experienced a sort of epiphany whilst watching films starring the muscle-bound former Mr. Universe, Steve Reeves.
I'd just go and see these films, and I remember there was one bit where this woman was sort of on the floor and holding his leg, and I thought, I want to do that.
But this was during 1950s England. Homosexuality was illegal, and public attitudes towards gay people were damning.
These people, these homosexuals, were a sort of a strange animal, I think. Sort of in my head, and I couldn't identify with it. I mean, I was wanking myself stupid over practically everybody at school, but I could only relate that to a phase that I was going to get over.
In the mid-60s, as debates on the morality and legalization of homosexuality were a major part of public discourse, Mark went to study at university. But as time passed, his phase didn't end. He became very depressed, eventually visiting a mental health hospital.
I was on Librium, imipramine, and Valium, each one supposedly to keep me off the bad effects of the others.
Mark's world felt dark, heavy.
When people talk about I became depressed and it was a blackness, I know what that is.
Feeling isolated, he struggled to see a future for himself.
And I went to the music department and played the piano ferociously for about 2 hours, and then went back to my room and took everything that they'd given me.
In his bedroom at university, Mark looked around at the empty medication packets. Faced with the reality of what would happen next, his perspective suddenly shifted.
I then thought, there may be something else. I may go on to something else. I'll stay here. And I went through to the boy next door and said, I've just taken a vast number of antidepressants and stuff. And he said, well, stick your finger down his throat, which I did.
Homosexuality was legalised in England and Wales in 1967. Mark's time at university came to an end. Then, in 1972, he moved to London. Amongst the hustle and bustle of the cosmopolitan city, he began to accept himself and his sexuality.
I was happy, and I thought, and this is who I am. And I told all my friends. I had not had sex with anybody, but I told all my friends, I want you to know that I'm gay. And I mean, I think at least 2 people said, if I'd known that you didn't know, I would have told you ages ago. I just remember thinking, if people don't want to know me, that's fine. I don't want to know them.
Good evening, icebreakers. My name's Mark. What's yours?
He became involved in the UK branch of the Gay Liberation Front, the GLF. The GLF were an activist group whose focus was not on law reform, but fighting for a revolutionary change in society for gays and lesbians. He volunteered with a GLF offshoot group called Icebreakers. It was a telephone support line running out of a radical squat in Brixton.
You say your name is Francis and you come from Golders Green. You feel you've missed your chances, yet your chance has never been. You felt gay since you were 20 and you now are 46. And you can't have a relationship with bumps and balls and bricks. And besides, your wife named Daphne and gay men can never mix.
It was for lonely gay people to talk to other gay people and realise that it was all right to be gay and just have a really positive voice talking to you. And to be able to talk to people on this phone line was good for me as well, I hope, as good for them.
Whilst volunteering, Mark wrote a song to perform at an Icebreakers anniversary party.
So come out, friend, lead the life you want to live. Come on out, friend, life has so much more to give whilst you're out, friend. It has made my night worthwhile to hear you smile. You're not hung up.
He had performed on different types of stages, but writing and performing songs about liberation for gay and lesbians to enjoy and find support in, this was new, and audiences loved it. Soon, Mark found himself performing across London's finest gay venues. He was living out and proud as one of the UK's first openly gay singers. It was with this mindset that in 1983, Mark found himself at lunch with his friend, Michael Mason. Michael was the editor at Gay News, the UK's fortnightly gay newspaper. He had heard about a number of gay choirs springing up across the US, and inspired by this, he said to Mark,
London needs a gay choir, and you are obviously the person to set it up. And I said, well, I'm obviously not, because I don't know anything about choirs and I don't know anything about running choirs.
Michael told Mark that Brian Kennedy, a prominent LGBTQ+ writer and activist, was very keen to make the choir happen. But still, Mark said no. Brian became very persistent.
There was a point where I reached, where I just remember saying to him, they're everywhere. I open the wardrobe drawer and Brian Kennedy comes out saying, what about the gay choir for London? And eventually I said that I would do it. But I would do it for 3 months. And then somebody else is going to have to take it over.
Given the seal of approval, Brian Kennedy advertised everywhere.
Thursday, 7th of April, 1983. New Gay Choir is having its first meeting at Oval House, 54 Kennington Oval, SE11, near Oval Tube, at 7:30 p.m. Any standard of sight reading, or lack of it, is acceptable. The choir aims to be mixed lesbian and gay male, and it is hoped that the choice of music will reflect this, although it is suggested that some women-only and men-only pieces may be performed. Anyone intending to turn up on Thursday should ring Brian Kennedy on 359-7372 during office hours with details of voice, if known, and should bring along suggestions for music. Gay News, issue number 262.
It's the day of the choir's first rehearsal. Mark is incredibly nervous.
I just didn't feel competent to do it.
He sits with Brian in the downstairs room of their rehearsal space in Oval. His heart is pounding as he watches the clock tick closer to 7:30 p.m. And then, slowly but surely, one by one, different groups start making their way into the room. Around 30 people take a seat around the rickety old piano. They're ready to sing.
Homosexual, homosexual, lesbian, lesbian. We are homosexual, we are homosexual, we're all gay, we're all gay, we're all gay, we're all gay.
It had worked at Pride marches before. Mark had started singing his adapted words to the tune of Frère Jacques, and the crowds around him had joined in. So why shouldn't it work for this new choir? Surely everyone knew this tune. And with that, a choir was born. You might be wondering who I am and why I'm telling you this story. Well, as I mentioned, I'm Cassian, Cass for short, and I'm a tenor 1 in the choir known today as the Pink Singers. Since that first meeting in the basement of a South London theatre, the choir has continued to get together, and this year, the Pink Singers celebrate our 40th anniversary. Throughout those 40 years, hundreds of choir members, or Pinkies as we call ourselves, have sung song after song, sharing messages of love, hope, unity, and liberation. We performed at protests and on stages in the UK and across the world. In the context of all this history, I'm a relatively new member. I first joined the Pink Singers in 2021. Before this, I'd been part of Spectrum Choir, an LGBT choir in Devon. But when I moved to London, I wanted to find people to sing with again, and to feel part of a community within this big city. I had heard of the Pink Singers, as most people within the queer choir community have, but I didn't know much about them. The repertoire, the members, the history, any of it. But singing with the Pink Singers, our Sunday rehearsals, soon became one of the highlights of my week. And it was with this mindset that I wanted to know more about how this had all come to be, and I wasn't alone. Many of my fellow Pinkies wanted to trace the history of the choir, from its early origins to the much larger iteration you see performing today. So throughout this series, you'll learn the incredible 40-year history of the Pink Singers. You'll learn it from Pinkies, both past and present. The sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses who were there throughout its history. Or newer Pinkies like me, who are digging into the archive to learn more about how we got here. The people you'll hear from come from all corners of the LGBTQ+ spectrum. And this is quite important to mention, because though the Pinkies is now much more representative of the wider queer community, it hasn't always been this way. Take myself, for instance. I'm a person of colour, and I'm a bisexual trans man. But when I dug into the Pinkies archive, I looked back at some photos of the first rehearsal of the Pink Singers, I noticed that nobody really looked like me there. In one of the photos, I see Mark gesticulating along with some music, his arms slightly blurred mid-photo capture. On the far side of the rehearsal room, sitting in chairs in a sort of horseshoe shape, are around 25 men. One wears a tight white t-shirt with the words Lonsdale emblazoned across it. A pair of suspender braces unnecessarily hold up his tight jeans. Another is clad in a black jacket, as pitch black as his thick bushy moustache. There are check shirts, blazers, thin ties, denim, argyle jumpers, and knitted cardigans. But one thing these men all have in common: they're all white. On the opposite side of the room, sitting together, are a small group of women, no more than 4 or 5. Again, they're all white. The Pink Singers started as an all-white choir, and there are no records of trans people in the choir at its formation. Perhaps this isn't totally surprising, given the context of the choir's roots in the gay activist movement of the 70s, before its formation in the early 80s. To be so open and vocal during this time took a lot of privilege. And of course, it was the white, gay, cisgendered men who were often university educated who held this privilege. Whereas back then, and still today, queer people of colour, women, bisexuals and trans folk remain marginalised within the wider LGBTQ+ community and society at large. Because of this, I can't help but think to myself, if I had been around in 1983, would I have been welcomed to join the newly formed Pink Singers? Would I have even wanted to join? Things have changed and are still changing for the choir. So through this podcast, you'll hear Pinkies learning about our history, but you'll also hear us reflecting upon and reckoning with it, whilst deciding where the choir's future lies. But for now, let's jump in a little further. What happened after the first rehearsal?
London's 1983 Lesbian and Gay Pride Carnival Parade assembles at Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park at 1:30 p.m.
There was a reason behind Brian Kennedy's insistence that the Pink Singers form as soon as possible. Brian had envisioned London and Europe's first ever lesbian and gay choir taking to the streets to sing and protest at the forthcoming Pride March. And somehow, it was decided that the newly formed Pink Singers would have quite an important role.
It will be led by a gay switchboard float that will carry the new Pink Singers through the centre of town. And it will end with the traditional night of partying at the University of London Union in Mallet Street, WC1. 1st of July 1983, capital gay.
With under 3 months to practice, time was of the essence for the Pinkies.
The sessions were on Sunday mornings, and they were in County Hall.
Jackie Quinnell was one of the first ever women and sopranos, that's the highest vocal range, to be part of the Pink Singers.
So there was a piano and a small group of us and a really big room that we were in. I'd already been there for some other more like political meetings.
With Pride fast approaching, the Pinkies found a new room to get together in, amongst the stone staircases and Edwardian windows of the Greater London Council's headquarters, County Hall. It almost directly faces Westminster. Such proximity to Parliament was perfect for Jackie. By day, she was a social worker, fighting for the rights of families in need. And once she realised more about her own sexuality, Jackie became more involved with LGBTQ+ activism.
I met some women at work who were lesbians and realised that maybe I was as well, or at least bisexual. And we ended up 3 of us in a relationship, me and 2 women. And I then, through that, got involved in a lot of activism. So I ran a gay youth group in South London, and I volunteered for Gay Switchboard, and I was also on the steering group for the new Lesbian and Gay Community Centre that was funded by the GLC.
It was while working on plans for London's soon-to-be-built, first ever Lesbian and Gay Community Centre, the LLGC, that Jackie met Brian Kennedy. She told him about her love of singing, and Brian encouraged her to join.
It was beautiful, especially when we were singing things that were political and were ridiculous. I found that quite joyous because I just wanted to laugh the whole time. So it was sort of singing and laughing at the same time. It was great.
On the occasion that the Pink Singers were unable to rehearse at County Hall, they often made their way to a house which had a baby grand piano on Dahlberg Road in Brixton. Dahlberg Road runs parallel to Railton Road. You may be familiar with Railton Road. It was where the Brixton Uprising started in 1981. But outside of this history, Railton Road and its surrounding areas were a hotbed for radicalism throughout the 70s and 80s. The dilapidated buildings along the street were home to black community organisers, single mothers, and a number of LGBTQ+ activist groups. Groups including the South London Gay Community Centre, the GLF Helpline, Icebreakers, which Mark mentioned earlier, and it seems the occasional Pinkies practice.
When I knew Gerard, he was a friend and a lodger in the house, and he was great fun. He had a great sense of humour. He was Liverpudlian and still had his Liverpool accent, and he taught us how to say his name because he said that only Southerners said Gerard and that his name was Gerard. So that's what he was. Yeah.
Chrissy Hackett lived with Gerard Windle at Dahlberg Road in Brixton. When he'd moved into the house, Gerard had made quite the impression.
One of the images that will always be in my mind is the time he came flouncing down the stairs and announced himself in the breakfast room with a sort of a ta-da, and he was wearing an exquisite dark blue lace cocktail dress. I think he had lipstick on and some earrings. But the dress was gorgeous and he absolutely loved it. And sometimes when the Pink Singers came around, he would wear the blue cocktail dress.
Though playful and clearly incredibly camp, Gerard was influenced by the political action taking place in Brixton at the time, and he became part of a faction of the Pink Singers who were keen to use the choir to make a political statement. He would later be quoted in a short article in Capital Gay newspaper.
It will be an overtly political response group. If something happened, like an arrest, they would stand outside the police station and sing or chant.
Though the Pinkies did split into two factions, the more political Pink Pickets and the more music-focused Pink Singers, the break didn't last long, and eventually the two groups rejoined under the choir's original name, though the choir did continue to serve different purposes to its members. As we know, Gerard was firmly on the activist side of things, and while they practiced at his home on Dahlberg Road, his housemate Chrissy remembers these radical attitudes forming part of the choir's repertoire.
There would always be sort of, elegant young men draped over the piano, really, which was highly appropriate because a lot of what they did was sort of, romantic torch songs.
The Pinkies were bringing a new and provocative meaning with their mostly male renditions of songs usually sung by women, which talked about their male lovers.
Next old favourites, Gershwin's The Man I Love. This one's more tribute to Lesbian.
You can hear this in the Pink Singers version of Ira and George Gershwin's 1924 piece, The Man I Love.
One day he'll come along, the man I love, and he'll be big and strong, the man I love. And when he comes my way, I'll do my best to make him stay.
I loved the way they sang it because they did it with kind of almost tongue-in-cheek kind of romance, But they put their heart and souls into it, and it was beautiful.
And though it seems absurd, I know we both say.
Chrissy had recently had a son, Tom. He would have been around 2 or 3 months old, and she remembers sitting on the floor with Tom in her arms, watching the Pinkies play and perform.
I just loved the fact that he was absorbing all that lovely atmosphere and lovely sound in the room, you know. I remember actually that Gerard always seemed to be very proud of the fact when he brought people into the house, including the gay singers for their rehearsals, he would point out the pram in the hall or any baby toys that might be around, because it felt like a point of pride, I think, for him, that he lived in this house that, you know, that was such a mixture of people, and that we, in a sense, we were being family, you know. And I think that mattered a lot, and I think that sort of feeling of, you know, breaking barriers down and exploring a new world, really. I think that came through in the atmosphere in the house and the way they were when they sang round that piano.
It was with this radical and empowered energy that the Pink Singers approached Pride, which would become their very first event as a choir, as a family. On an incredibly hot and sweaty day, 2nd of July 1983, Gerard, Jackie and the rest of the Pinkies took up their place on the float at the front of the crowds. I'm looking at the photo of this happening now. This float is about 15 metres tall and is strewn with flyaway pink ribbons. It's hard to say how many people are on the float, but I'm positive that it would not pass today's health and safety regulations. It looks like so much fun. Gerard stands at the back of the float, smiling into the camera. He's tall, elegant, with a denim shirt tied in a knot around his ribs, and a pair of bootleg blue jeans hanging high from his midriff. Jackie is next to Gerard. She has short hair and a striped shirt. She's leaning forward, trying to keep another Pinky on board the moving vehicle.
I don't think I'd realised we were going to be on the back of a float. So that in itself was a bit of a skill, trying to sing on a moving vehicle, holding on for dear life to the side and trying not to fall off it.
Policemen hang in the shadows of the photographs. And then
we started singing.
Because we're queer, because we're here, because we're queer. We're here because we're queer.
The Pinkies launched into their limited repertoire, including songs with the lyrics, "We're here because we're queer, we're here because we're queer."
We're here because we're queer, because we're here because we're queer.
And this alternative version of a Christmas classic.
God help you, merry lesbians, for much to your dismay. You have to see your family at least on Christmas Day. For relative discomfort or for total disarray. And they dare call this comfort and joy, and they dare call this comfort and joy.
Perfect for a swelteringly hot summer's day. There was also something even more abstract.
The one I recall is the song by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Veni, which roughly translates to I Come, was written by Mark Bunyan and sung by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, an order of queer and trans nuns who still perform and protest today. They sang this version of Veni on Fruit Punch, a radical radio show broadcasting on KPFA in December 1981.
So do I, so do I, and I, so do I, and I come.
And Mark had written a song for them. It was partly in Latin. I can remember the chorus was, I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming.
As Mark says,
it sounds quite medieval religion at the beginning, and then you realise it's getting sort of slightly naughtier and naughtier as it goes on.
The parade continues as the Pink Singers sing out together across the streets of London, heralded by thousands of pink balloons.
Everyone was really sort of appreciative and shouting and cheering. So that felt very supportive. A bit like a football team returning home to its home city after it's won a cup of some sort.
After the thrills and spills of pride marches in the last 4 years, 1979, the biggest, 1980, angry at police confrontation, 1981, the last-minute switch to Huddersfield, 1982, thunderstorms, glorious sunshine welcomed the 1983 parade, which with the help of thousands of pink balloons and the Pink Singers was simply a joy. The parade, led by a float carrying the Pink Singers, God help you merry lesbians, for much to your dismay, left Hyde Park at lunchtime and went down Park Lane and Piccadilly to the amusement and bemusement of tourists and shoppers, and then on up Shaftesbury Avenue and Tottenham Court Road to the University of London Students' Union building in Mallet Street for a party. The marchers seemed reluctant to go into the building despite police orders, but the Pink Singers encouraged them with a burst of, "Oh, will you gays go marching in?" Capital Gay, 8th of July, 1983.
Oh, will you gays, go marching in, go marching in. Oh, will you gays go marching in? I want to be at that party. Oh, will you gays go marching in?
This was a huge moment for the Pink Singers, their first event, their first pride together as the first lesbian and gay choir in London and Europe. The Pinkies were full of hope and a sense of belonging. They felt like they were making positive changes in society. They were taking a stand, and all whilst doing something they loved.
I felt valued for what I could do and how I could perform. Certainly realising that I could sing and make lovely sounds with other people on the Pride March. I really felt that was one of my greatest achievements, really. Singing on a float in the open air and having a brilliant time.
But amidst all of this optimism, there was also growing concern. A year earlier, in 1982, Terry Higgins, a gay man, was one of the first people to die as a result of AIDS-related illnesses in the UK. The newspapers were referring to AIDS as the gay plague, and fear was spreading throughout the community. And though they didn't know it, the Pink Singers were about to play a key role in the unfolding AIDS epidemic of 1980s Britain.
Sing It Pink, The Story of the Pink Singers is an Aunt Nell production. It was made possible by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. The presenter of episode 1 was Cassian Fagilde. The producer was Rachel Byrne. The assistant producer was Marnie Woodmeade. The executive producers were Tash Walker and Adam Zmith. The executive producer for the Pink Singers was Chris Scales. The archive was voiced by Annie Ring and Will Paxton. Audio mix was by David Pye. Special thanks to Chrissy Hackett, Mark Bunyan, Jackie Quinnell, Capital Gay, the Bishopsgate Archives, the Pink Singers, and Acast Studios.